Today is going to be a rather long lesson as to what balancing a game actually means, and why it is important in order to maintain a game's longevity in a healthy manner. So, get a snack or something, kiddo, and sit down, because it's going to be a while. I have no idea when the next big update comes, but hopefully it's in a day or two of this dropping. The key points I would like to address today will be what balance actually means, why it's necessary for your game's survival, and how to get it done properly. Oh, and why I felt it important to say this in general. There's so much complaints and confusion surrounding this topic, so hopefully I can provide some clarity on the matter without stoking the fire of controversy, but you never really know what to expect when you spark up this topic. I would like to start off by saying this game is great, even with its many faults, and all I ask is that if you disagree, find some way to state it politely, because if you come at this sideways and start cussing stuff out, YouTube automatically dumps your comment into the purgatory that is the held for review section of my video feedback that I never really look at. Without further ado, let's begin. We have now reached the main objective. What in fresh hell does balance even mean? Balance refers to an ideal, a state in which nothing is necessarily dominant, a reality in which there is no meta, somewhere no gun is overpowered, but instead all guns either work remarkably towards a specialty or capably towards all general tasks. But it doesn't extend to only that. It also scales in regard to skill. The more difficult or precarious using a particular weapon may be, the more you get rewarded for finding success with it. That's not to say the easy weapons don't get any love. It's expected that they are to behave what would be considered a stable and reliable standard. And the aforementioned difficult weapons surpass that notion of average performance, giving more reward to the risk undertaken by using them. Balance must also not affect only the player, it must affect the enemies and the environment as well, but we're going to get more into that when we dive into how balance should be applied. Before we do that, we have to establish why it matters to begin with. You may find this helpful when trying to articulate to others why every gun can't be a powerhouse, destroying everything in its path. There's a handful of reasonings for this. When you make a weapon that takes no learning to use, and it's incredibly powerful, that's the only weapon anyone will use. That leads to stagnation, and stagnation leads to the game becoming a chore, because there's never any difference or variety in gameplay. It also leads to overcompensating jackasses whose fathers didn't tell them good job enough as a child to chastise and demean players for not running the loadout they consider to be the best. Of course, it would then beg the question, why not make all guns super strong? An admirable suggestion, if there ever was one. If we make all the guns behemoths, then nobody gets removed because they're all exceptional and there's variety, right? Yes and no, but more so no, and the reason is very similar. When you make all of your guns incredibly powerful, then there's no challenge, and thus there's no feel-good hormones getting released in your brain when you win, because you expected it all along since you're using the hand of God to carelessly clear all the highest difficulties. I'll get more into this in a moment, but if you want an example, take the strongest no-skill guns you can find into difficulty 1, and tell me how long instantly killing everything keeps you entertained. My guess would be not very. I don't want to be the old man on his porch in a rocking chair bitching about kids these days and participation trophies, but even a broken clock is right twice a day, and there's a sliver of truth in his rabid, insane ramblings. If everyone gets exactly what they want, all of the time, the process of working hard and improving in order to attain a goal, along with the overwhelming sense of accomplishment and pride you get from completing it, are stripped away. In a game like this, entertainment and challenge go hand in hand. One would not be the same without the other, and you can't have either with weapons that completely dominate the landscape. We have arrived at what will likely be the heaviest portion of this entire video. But then again it might not be, because I've revised the hell out of it since writing that statement. What I'm about to say could take 2 minutes, could take 20 seconds, could take 20 minutes. I have no idea, we're just gonna find out. It is also probably going to be the most contentious part of the video. likely to cause a great deal of differing opinions, but that's okay. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion here. The most sensible way to balance weaponry and the like is typically by listening to your community. However, there's a great deal of vocal individuals here, on Reddit in particular, who like to drop takes hotter than the fucking sun that stink like a pile of garbage which has been sitting out in said sun all week. I'm sorry I had to phrase it that way, but seriously, if you ever have the great misfortune to stumble across some of these, you will realize that if the game was centered around them, it would be dead as a doornail upon release. So, now that we've established who we aren't consulting to fix things up because it's going to result in the game becoming the equivalent of some real estate agent's Kia Soul that found its way into Pimp My Ride and got its backseat fitted with an aquarium, who are we going to listen to? This is difficult because you have to find a very specific type of person. You need to find the people who are remarkably good at playing, simply as a baseline. The ones that can lay their hands on the most complicated of weaponry and treat it like Jimi Hendrix plays a guitar. Then you need to sift through that pile and find who actually wants to do the work and help you with feedback. Then you need to narrow the scope even further and select the ones creative enough to provide you out-of-the-box solutions. And once that's all done, you need to get enough to 1. Test your weaponry, and 2. Provide honest and actionable feedback. It's not a secret that most developers aren't very good at clearing the higher difficulties, but there's no shame in delegating to those who can in order to figure out what's wrong. And no, this is not elitism. Hold on for a minute, it's going to make sense once I explain it. The reason you get those upper echelon players to give their input on guns is because if they can't do it, your standard players also won't be able to do it. This doesn't mean every gun has to have an incredibly high skill ceiling to use, catering towards those individuals. As a matter of fact, that's something you need to watch out for, but as you've heard me here a lot of times say, we will get to that later. It means you can figure out whether or not a gun can perform, and if the effectiveness is determined on who's holding it, or if it plain doesn't work at all. Those people should be able to tell you if the gun behaves generally well, straight down the middle, or if the risk-reward balance is askew. Then they can discuss on how to workshop it into a better place. I am not saying you make all of the guns require high-risk gameplay. I am simply saying it's entirely okay to have some firearms that people need to really practice their ass off in order to use to their full potential. That way, you've got room for your average player who just got off of work and wants to go a few rounds at level 5 or 6 using standard weaponry and finding success. And there's an added benefit and incentive for getting better with those high skill guns that can be reached should they want to. I hate to make this reference, mostly because when I say this game's name I get a sour taste in my mouth, but the closest comparison I could give to you is Overwatch. Ugh. Ugh, sour. Anyway, specifically Soldier 76 compared to Doomfist, in theory at least, not in practice. Back when I played it, it went a little something like this. 76 is a fine all-arounder that you can lean on if you're learning or even playing the long game. He can do a little bit of everything well, and it's not hard to learn how, but you can still find success playing him long-term. Doomfist, on the other hand, can often be seen as bad because he's a pain in the ass to learn how to play, but once you figure it out, you're on demon time 24/7 and you drag all of your opponents through the mud. The point is, it's entirely reasonable to put weapons in the game that involve a steep learning curve, so long as the amount of them aren't oversaturating the weapons department and the payoff is actually worth the effort expenditure. Right now, that's likely the biggest area in regards to balance that the game is struggling with. Is this weapon worth using, being as hard to use as it is? Example. Yes, you can kill a Bile Titan or a gunship with a railgun, but you'll need to dedicate 3 to 5 business days in order to do it, and that doesn't make sense. But then again, I will get into how that very well may be a problem regarding the enemies themselves in a moment, rather. I went through all of that, I'm not re-recording it. I'll be real with you. If those solutions are being put into place, they're being put into place after a while. I had a massive segment about balancing based upon how weapons feel to use as opposed to numbers, but it seems like now the game balancing department is actually going about it that way. So with that being said, I'm gonna skip on to the next portion while I wait and see how this pans out for them. If it seems shoddy in the future, this will be revisited. That's guns done, but I told you we would talk enemies, so here we go. There is no problem with having heavily armored enemies. There is a caveat to that. This is acceptable so long as there is a critical spot, even if it may only be a sliver, wherein it is armored to a slightly lesser degree. It doesn't have to be easy, and it doesn't have to be weak, but it does need to be an additional vulnerability. There's a lot of dangerous enemies with very finite ways to kill them efficiently, or in some cases, they're such a bullet sponge, it usually doesn't matter what you hit them with. There's two big culprits here that I think would benefit from such a thing. Firstly, the Bile Titan, and secondly, to a much lesser degree, the gunship. I get that Bile Titans are supposed to be well armored, and I don't want to take that away from them. But that much resilience on a target that is not only faster than you, but can slow you down with an attack that's got a splash like Lizzo coming off the diving board that you're practically hopeless to outrun, doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense that you can gut this creature and the sun will burn itself out and implode prior to it considering bleeding out as a life choice. Look at Striders in contrast, a fantastic example of well-placed critical points and a meaningful process of disarming that doesn't require massively powerful equipment. The primary ways to kill a Titan who appear much more frequently than Striders are anti-tank rounds, which they're a little spotty because the head hitbox is janked, and sometimes it just deflects them right off. Otherwise, there's entitled orbitals, or 500s, of which it usually burns 2 due to eagle unpredictability, combined with Bile Titan's footwork being like the Thriller music video, or slamming hell pods through it, of which once again, for some reason, takes 2. Not to mention, they seem to take reduced headshot damage when vomiting, the only time it truly stays still, and you can barely stagger them. This is not a result of weapons failure. The weapons work fine. It's the result of creating an enemy with a lack of ways to defeat it efficiently, especially now that Spore Spewers and Shrieker Nests eat up the same resources. The same extends to gunships. You give this thing what looks like a cockpit, but there's no chance to actually hit the pilot that should be residing therein with heavy armor-piercing weaponry like a railgun, yet, for some reason, you can do it with the splash damage from a plasma gun. You don't need to buff every weapon to the moon and back to fix that. All that it would entail is an incorporation of some proper critical locations or scaling back how unreasonably strong some creatures have gotten. So what was the point of this whole soliloquy regarding game balancing? It's in an effort to inform. I want you to be able to have some sort of retort to the people avoiding all hydration in their body due to tears shed over rage bait. I wanted to show people who are willing to listen that one weapon changing does not directly translate to the game ending because there's a handful of other interesting guns to choose from, often getting more powerful as a result. Balancing adjustments are made in an effort to help the game operate evenly, not to arbitrarily make something useless because people enjoy it. The solutions need not be crazy or outlandish either. The simplest of changes can make a world of difference. I also wanted to exemplify the possibilities that this game can improve, and rather easily at that. Finally, I wanted to hopefully let someone in charge know, as always but very unlikely, that the community wants to help, and we want this game to succeed just as much as they do, and we're willing to help to get it done. The vocal minority of Banshee children does not represent the broader scope of your player base. Not saying every complaint is invalid, I have plenty of my own, but there's some people who only care about the game for the sake of punching down on it for clicks. That's our little lesson for today. Hopefully it was able to provide clarity, answers, or a new perspective. As I said, feel free to ask questions, just keep them respectful and I'll try to get to them all. I'd like to hear how some of you feel on balance, because everyone's a little different. New perspectives could be helpful. Other than that, as usual, if you want to play, join the Discord link in the channel information. We're 350 something and growing, but I do my best to maintain a good atmosphere there. With that said, let's hope that update in the Illuminate are coming soon, because the anticipation is killing me. In any case though, stay safe out there, divers, and have a good night.